folks, welcome to the Late Night Snack. I'm your host, Jared Lendy. Let's talk. I'd say I'm pretty active in my faith, and it shows from being part of a Christ-centered household growing up. For instance, my mom was raised Roman Catholic, and my dad was part of the ELCA Lutheran Church, and until about my preteen years I was there, until I moved to the LCMS Lutheran Church, where I currently drum around almost every Saturday night, if you guys have seen on my Instagram. Now, there are some different things about each church's belief. For instance, there are some people that say, oh, are you predestined to give your children a pre-trib baptism or wait until they grow up and have their own free will to do so? Now, theology nerds might get that last joke, but I don't know about the rest of you guys. But there's always been a constant with all the churches I've gone to, and it's this. No, it's not a hymnal, and unfortunately, it's not a Bible. It's a cookbook. Well, let me explain. In different churches, at least the ones in the Midwest, every few years their congregation members would have their best recipes and combine them into one cookbook that they would be able to sell for a church fundraiser. For instance, if you take a look at this cookbook from the 1960s and early 70s, you take a look and on the first page there is a cheese ball, and from my research in the 1970s, cheese balls were a big trend. Same thing with the Black Forest torte that's on this page 77. It coincides with the food trends of the 1970s. And yes, unfortunately, on page 83, there is this citrus jello mold that you add tuna or salmon into it. I don't know, it was the 70s. And if you look at page 47 on here, they have a scripture cake, or what they call a Bible cake, with all the answers already here. There's not really much fun in this. If you want to learn more about the scripture cakes, I suggest checking this video right here that I made. I've noticed not only the food trends changed over time, but also the methodology for actually making the foods. For instance, this cookbook that my mom has, it looks like it might be from like the 1950s or so, because it's been used so much. There are some tattered pages here. If you take a look at the recipe for caramels, you notice that there's no actual temperature for when the caramels are done. You have to actually take some of the syrup, put it in cold water, and feel the texture of the caramel. Very interesting. You can also see some beliefs faintly represented in some of these cookbooks. For example, in the Women of the ELCA cookbook, you can see that there's a recipe submitted by a Mr. Bob W. in the Women of the ELCA cookbook. And there is also a recipe for gingerbread people. Just goes to show you that the ELCA was progressive even back then. If you actually go to the church that has the cookbooks just like this one in 2010, you can see some people that you actually know and their mainstay recipes, just like my mom's for Halloween bars. Hold on, I'm gonna need to phone a friend.
Hey, Jared, what's up?
Hey, Anna, how you doing?
Good, how are you doing?
I'm doing alright. Do you recall Mom ever making something called a Halloween bar?
No, seeing that Mom didn't really particularly like Halloween, I think her extent of Halloween was putting a happy pumpkin in front of our house. A happy one.
Yeah, that sounds about right, Han. There you have it, folks. My mom doesn't even like Halloween. Why would she have a Halloween bar recipe? Now, I feel like Italians all have decor recipes that they give out to people. That way they don't actually share their own recipes. Why does it feel like I just stepped into an Everybody Loves Raymond episode? I cannot believe your mother did that, Ray. You better go to Marie right now and expose her for what she did.
Okay, Dad, I'll go right now. Ma, just look at this recipe you have for Halloween bars. You don't even like Halloween.
Why does that matter, Raymond?
What do you mean, why does it matter? You lied in a church cookbook, Ma. A church cookbook.
Oh, Raymond, I'm so sorry. I just didn't want horrible cooks ruining my dishes. Imagine Deborah using it. Could you ever forgive me, Ray?
Alright, Ma. I forgive you.
Oh, thank you, Ray. Could I get you something to eat, dear? I'd like something to eat, Ma. Oh, sure, Robbie. Have some cereal. Everybody loves Raymond. You know, it amazes me how people overlook one of the greatest sitcoms ever, and The Office has a freaking cult. I don't get it. Anyways, I looked at all these cookbooks, and I chose 3 cookbooks to recreate recipes from, and I bet you already know what I'm gonna make from here. And we're back, folks. I thought that we would do my mom's recipe for Halloween bars first, because you know how much she likes Halloween. Recipe says for the oven to be preheated to 325, and I have that right now. Instead of actually just melting in the microwave like anybody else in 2010, she suggests popping a stick of butter into the 9x13 directly and just melting it in the oven instead of just starting with melted butter to begin with. If this was my recipe, I would just use melted butter, and I assume that my mom would do the same thing, but you know what? It's her recipe, allegedly, and it's her rules, so I'm gonna do that right now. There you have it. What could have taken about 30 seconds in the microwave took an additional 5. I have to say, the milk solids look like they're cooked a little more, so I will give my mom that. You know what? That's what we do on the channel. Just teaching you how to cook through comedy, whether you think it's funny or not. Anyways, I'm going to add the graham crackers to this. You know, I'd say that's about as even as I can get it, so I'm just going to add the sweetened condensed milk. I prefer the one that just has the little tab right here. And just pour that all over. I'd suggest just using a rubber spatula just to get the rest out here. It just says to add the chocolate chips. Same thing with peanut butter chips. And it says to press down firmly. And this is going in the oven for about 25 to 30 minutes, it says. We have to wait for a while for this to cool down before we can cut into it, but that's okay because we got another cookbook to go through. This next recipe my mom made quite a bit growing up. So I have a couple of sticks of butter right here, and I'm gonna add the brown sugar, and I'm just gonna cream this until smooth. Just a reminder, the recipes are gonna be in the description box down below. This next part requires sifting, but I'm not a fan of sifting, so you can do whatever you want. I'm just making this as historically accurate as possible. I've got the egg yolk and vanilla right here, and we're just gonna mix again. Now I'm supposed to spread this on a cookie sheet and move it around all together. One side note real quick, you have to like mix it with your hands so the warmth of your hands actually melts the butter so it forms a dough, and then spread it out onto a cookie sheet. Should look like this, and we're just going to place these in a 350 degree oven for about a half an hour. This recipe requires chopped nuts, so I'm just chopping them right now with my new cutting board that I got from my sister-in-law Bailey from the people over at Double Bevel. I'll have a link in the description. These are really nice cutting boards. You gotta check them out. Not sponsored. I took these out after 25 minutes because look at how great this looks. I'm just going to have a nice even layer of chocolate chips. Then after that, we're going to put them back in the oven just for them to melt a little bit. It's been about a minute in the oven, so I'm just going to use an offset spatula to just spread the chocolate all around the toffee square. And just finish it off with some chopped pecans. I need to do better at distributing everything. We have to wait a little bit for these to cool down before we can slice them, so I'm going to work on the final recipe for today, which is a recipe for Bavarian cream pie by my great-grandmother, Helen Schultz. So it'll be fun to work on this one. You know, it looks like my great-grandmother assumed that we knew more about cooking because the first step here is make a custard, which a custard is like 2 or 3 steps in of itself. Reminds me of that one Steve Martin joke where he says that you can be a millionaire and not pay taxes, and the first step is to become a millionaire. I know I butchered that I'm sorry. Well, that's why this is a cooking show, so I'm going to show you my method. I've got the sugar right here, and I'm going to put the egg yolks in the sugar, and we're going to whisk this until it's lighter in color. This right here looks pretty good, so I'm going to add the milk, and we're going to cook this on medium-low heat until it's thicker. I switched to a silicone spatula because this was foaming a little too much, which I'm not sure why that's possible because we did not use egg whites. Anyone care to explain that in the comments? Okay, it's already pretty thick, so I'm going to kill the heat and add in the gelatin that we were supposed to bloom. Now I added in the heavy whipping cream, and now the vanilla. Just gonna pour the cooled mixture into the graham cracker crust. Not gonna lie, I did not think that that was gonna fill it. And while this is cooling, let's try the other recipes. So this is my mom's world famous Halloween bar. Let's give it a taste. If we set aside the entire controversy about this, this is a pretty good bar. Kind of reminds me of a 7-layer bar, minus like 3 layers, so this is like a 4-layer bar. Chocolate's a little overpowering, but I think that you can change that depending on what chocolate you use. Overall, I like it. Now this one I recommend taking them out when they're still a little bit warm, otherwise you're just going to have a little difficult time taking them out. Otherwise, it's a pretty easy one. Let's give it a try. These are as good, even better than I remember. You've got that awesome toffee layer on the bottom, then the milk chocolate in there kind of smooths it out a little bit. The pecans add a nice contrast. I really like this one. Well, it's been over 24 hours, so here we have the Bavarian cream pie. Looks a little jiggly if you can see. And it really doesn't look like a Bavarian cream pie, I'm not gonna lie. But looks can be deceiving. So let's give it a taste. You know, I have to say this is a very good custard pie. However, I just don't see this as a Bavarian cream pie. If anything, it's basically a panna cotta with a graham cracker crust, which is a good thing. But I just don't think this is a Bavarian cream pie. It's almost like Grandma Schultz isn't even using her own recipe. I'm gonna need to check on something. 1 second. Actually, I'm gonna need the microphone and camera too. Let's go! Right here we have my grandma, Fern Lendy, and she is the daughter of Helen Schultz, who wrote quite a few recipes in the Our Daily Bread Faith Lutheran Church Cookbook. Now, Grandma, do you remember her making donuts?
No, I don't.
How about banana bread?
I don't think so.
What about Bavarian cream pie?
I don't recall the cream pie either. I just recall all the delicious cakes my mom made.
You know, that's very interesting because I don't see any cakes authored by Helen Schultz in this cookbook.
I think she kept the recipes to the cakes secret.
Can I just show you one more thing, Grandma?
Yes.
Does this remind you of anything that she's ever made before?
I'm sorry to say, no.
Okay. Thanks, Grandma. I really appreciate that.
Oh, no problem.
So, what did we learn today? Well, we found out that these church cookbooks act as a culinary time capsule. You get a real feel for what was popular back then. Second thing you need to know are these recipes include ingredients that are easy to come by and they're simple to replicate. And finally, no matter what person, no matter what age, no matter what denomination, there are going to be people that will go out of their way to protect their own recipes. Now, is lying in a church cookbook a sin? Well, you might want to ask your pastor about that. Either way, Jesus forgives all sins. Well, that's all the time we have for tonight, folks. Until next time, I'm Jared Lendy with Late Night Snack. Good night. Oh wait, that reminds me, I can finish the Raymond sketch now. Well, Ray, it looks like you found out what side of the family lying comes from. Oh really, Frank? Well, it just so happens that I found some recipes from your mother in this cookbook. Like the donuts, or banana bread, or Bavarian cream pie. I don't remember her making any of those.
What? What the? Holy crap!